All right, thank you guys. Yeah, it's Brian and Hank here. We also have Patrick Gillette that has worked that's worked 20 years over in the acquisition community as well. That's been recently brought on board here at Treble One with us. So thanks everybody for joining today. Obviously, it's a challenging time with we were fully expecting this to be kind of a workshop down in Austin, but we'll make do here. So I kind of want to just, before we kind of jump into the charts, I wanted to kick things off by kind of setting the scene here. And, you know, given we're not sure who's on the call, I can imagine that we have Phase 1, Phase 2 SBIR awardees, maybe new government customers that are running new SBIR programs. But kind of our goal today is to educate you on the transition planning and challenges that you might face throughout the program. And by addressing kind of these challenges will help you in your Phase 3, trying to get to a Phase 3 and become successful in the program. And so that's kind of the intent today, is to kind of walk through some of these challenges and make sure that whether you're in a newly formed Phase 1 and trying to engage with your customer, or knee-deep in a Phase 2 doing a capability demo, that you're addressing these challenges to get to a Phase 3.
Great, thanks.
So this is just something that this is an old proverb that maybe a lot of you have heard before, but it's used in sports world, it's used in business. But a goal without a plan is a wish. I love this statement, and we tie it into SBIR a lot, because your SBIR program, without a really successful and well-defined transition plan, will likely not transition. And it's the shortest, it's the truth.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the valley of death and what we would call a Phase 2.5, and everybody kind of points to funding as the key, reason that SBIRs don't transition. But the reality is it's equally, if not greater, the lack of planning to move things forward. So, and building confidence and the right stakeholder alignment in your program. So we're Treble One. We've been around for 20 years, located in Dayton, Ohio, aligned very closely with the Air Force Research and Acquisition and Sustainment community. We've been helping mostly businesses for the last 20 years help transition their technologies from Phase 1 to Phase 3. We've recently been hired by AFWERX and some of the other Air Force organizations to help not only I'll call it the AFWERX SBIR ecosystem, but a lot of the new companies that are brand new to the government help work through this challenge. We maintain a very broad network across both the Air Force, other parts of the DoD, and industry partners. And then we, like I said, have a lot of expertise in SBIR kind of transition and commercialization planning. And so our mission, our reason for being, is to help companies deliver new and innovative capabilities to the Air Force. So that's what we're wired to do. And so we're going to walk you guys through, again, sort of our own planning tools and process that we go through, just to make you aware of some of the things you need to be thinking about and discussing with your stakeholders. So typical SBIR background, you guys may or may not be aware of this, but there's a Phase 1 feasibility analysis. There's a Phase 2 period that's kind of, we view as more of doing a capability demonstration, maybe some product enhancement type features as well. And then there's this middle piece we call Phase 2.5, where that could be investor funded, that could be DoD or PEO customer funded. There's other tools like Strategic SBIR or StratFi that help fill this gap. But depending on the nature of your product and how complex it might be to integrate it with a system or an Air Force organization, or mature it or validate it for kind of durable fielded use, that could be a small amount of money, or that could be literally $10 million. And so this is the part where everybody falls down and where all these programs stall out, is lack of planning for activities, tests, funding, budgets, et cetera, to move into the Phase 3. So just want to put this together as a snapshot. Yep.
Yeah, just, Brian's right that Phase 2.5 is probably the most underappreciated and challenging aspect of a development program. What I would say, though, is don't look at this as stovepipes of Phase 1, I do this, Phase 2, I do this, Phase 2.5 is when I start thinking about tech validation. What we would challenge you and the whole community is that these discussions on what it takes to go through Phase 2.5 need to start as early as possible. As soon as you identify your customer, perhaps in a phase one, that's when you need to start having these conversations of what is the expectation for our validation or maturation program? What is the expectation of how that might get funded? And what do we need to start doing to put plans in place to who pays for that? How's it going to be contracted and things like that? So phase one and phase two in the SBIR program, they're kind of very well defined. Phase one, the SBIR is trying to be more agile, and that's great. Focused on, identifying customers and doing capability demos. And it's being executed through this new AFWERX open topic. That phase 2.5, as Brian said, it's the most challenging, but a lot of those challenging areas could be addressed kind of early on to get to phase 3.
Yeah, and technologies can go from phase 1 directly to phase 3. That is possible, both contractually as well as practically. However, it won't go to phase 3 unless some aspects of this transition planning are done by you or your customer. So just want to lay that out. So this is just meant to show, when you think about more traditional Air Force acquisition, how we buy weapon systems, whether they're satellites or planes or missiles. The Air Force is working very hard to streamline and accelerate this process. But if you look at between, kind of triangles B and C, where we call engineering, manufacturing, development, that's where the government on a traditional weapon system, now that they understand that they've got maybe a capability that will provide benefit to the warfighter, now it's a matter of scaling it up into more mature technology that's robust, that can be manufactured at scale and at quality. And the Air Force can literally spend billions of dollars on a weapon system platform, maturing it to the point of getting into production. And so SBIR is different. They're usually a lot smaller scale development activities. But the Air Force has already a very rigorous process to go through that, what we would again call a phase 2.5, or more traditionally engineering, manufacturing, and development. So it's not trivial. It takes a lot of planning. And as you engage with your customer, just be aware that that's how they think. If you go to a program executive office, a PEO, or a depot, or even the warfighter, they're going to be thinking through these things and wanting to know what's your game plan to manufacture, to scale, to support. So we'll get into some of that detail a little bit later. So this chart is meant to show you just some of the, 6 or 7 key activities that you need to start thinking about and planning. And I would say for the small businesses, think about these things in your proposal stage for the phase 1. At the very least, day 1 of your phase 1, you need to start this process. And for the government people that are putting out needs lists or running SBIRs, ideally you'd start this planning well before you even published a focus area or a topic. You need to start having some of these in place. And so why do programs typically fail? Well, there's a lack of a requirement or a customer that really needs it and has a validated, and there's a validated process to do that. Of course, lack of funding, lack of planning for some of these, I'll call it hard and soft costs to integrate, and then really a lack of leadership, right? So if you think about it, if no one is driving it, either inside or outside the government, your program will just stall out. It has to have someone to drive it because everyone's very busy with lots of other things. And likely your SBIR is going to come in to solve a problem. That's just one of 20 other things that your government counterpart is dealing with. And so it's important to him, but it's not the most important thing, I guarantee it. So without that drive and that leadership from some aspect, things will just naturally stall out because everybody's busy and has other things to do. So going through them real quickly, you can kind of read. I would say from our perspective, the requirement aspect, I'll call it the demonstration and validation. So demonstrating operational capability or benefit, and then validating it for rugged military use. And then the funding is the other piece that really trips people up. So most government funding cycles are 12 to 24-month lead times. So if you don't start on the phase 1, at the day 1, thinking about where's the funding going to come to integrate this or to acquire systems or to do whatever, you'll have a gap in your program, or like I said, likely it'll just stall out. And we'll go into some of these in a little bit more depth here as we go.
Yeah, and just so as each of your, if I can envision that we have, multiple brand new SBIR companies and government customers all running different programs, not all of these these focus areas, I'll call them macro transition areas, may apply, but they need to be discussed with your customers, right? And the biggest piece in the middle here is that stakeholder engagement. And what I would say is, you're going to have many different stakeholders, whether it be within a contracting organization or an end customer setting a requirement, or working with the PEO to go through what's required from a validation process. And so it's incumbent upon you and your customer to identify who are those key stakeholders, again, through phase 1 and phase 2 as you're going through your program.
Yeah, that's a great point. So stakeholder engagement, Hank wrote this yesterday, it takes a village to raise a child, and it equally takes a village of stakeholders to successfully transition technology. And so flipping that on its head, we like to say, it takes 10 people in the government to say yes, but only one person to say no. So somewhere out in the Air Force might be a stakeholder that controls some aspect of integrating your product into the Air Force, and they may have a hang up or an issue or some constraint on them, and that could derail your program. So you sort of, again, need to discuss early on with your customer, identify who are these key stakeholders that we need to be engaged with. And it could be leadership, so that they can understand and help set a requirement or unlock funding or plan funding. There's many functional experts, engineering, logistics, non-destructive inspection. There's EPA and OSHA if you're putting in a process at a depot or some kind of field maintenance activity. There's the actual operators implementing themselves. They're often very different from the buyers. So someone else like the PEO might be buying your system, but there's actual operators that are using it, and their input drives both leadership and your sort of acquirers to do things. There's policy and support and supply and all those kind of things. So this isn't an inclusive list, but it's a partial list. And the key is work with your Air Force customer, ask good questions, and identify these stakeholders and engage them extremely early, even if you're in phase 1. So the requirement. Want to footstop this one very hard. An MOU is not a requirement. The Air Force has a very regimented and routine process for establishing a requirement that allows a platform to be modified, a new capability to be acquired, a policy like maintenance policy to be changed. And there are big Air Force requirements that initiate major weapon system platforms like the F-35. More than likely, if you are doing a SBIR program, you will have what we would call an urgent operational need, which is a commander in the field saying, I need this to solve a critical gap in my warfighting capability, and I need it now. Or an Air Force 1067, which says, hey, we're doing it this way today, and as Tony Perez would like to say, here's what sucks about that, and here's what we'd like to change. Okay, well, do we have a defined benefit? How much funding do we need? Do we have key stakeholders bought in? Do we have a plan in place for contracting, et cetera? And so all those go into inputs into this Form 1067. Not all SBIRs will require one, but at least you need to be thinking about this and asking that question. Will we need a 1067? Will we need a formal requirement for us to implement our technology? And the answer might be no. Hey, at the unit level, we can just buy these on a government purchase card. We don't need to ask anybody. We're buying Bluetooth trackers for our maintenance equipment, and we're off the net, and it's good. Or we're now implementing software that's going to go on the net. We've got to change something. We've got to spend money to buy new PCs to host it, et cetera, and that will likely drive some kind of a formal requirement to then unlock the funding. To be very clear, no money can be programmed in the government without a requirement of some sort, either a UON or an endorsement or a stated need from a commander, or a 1067 or an Air Force requirement. So the requirement is key to getting the funding to transition to phase 3. That should be very clear. Yeah. Okay, demonstration validation, our favorite subject. This is sort of where we live. If you have a hardware or software product that's going to be interfaced with or inserted on a platform of some type, an aircraft, a UAV, at the depot as an inspection process or whatever, there likely will be some aspect of validation that you'll have to go through. So just to be clear, demonstration basically is the focus of your phase 2, and that's demonstrating to a customer or a set of customers that, hey, our technology has a demonstrated benefit to your capability. It's got a measurable benefit that we can, assess the baseline and what goodness we provide. And then from there, you start the more rigorous process of, well, how do I actually put that in the hands of the warfighter or hang it on a platform or insert it onto the software, to the net, right? And so there are a whole host of tests that might need to be done, or if you're in software, intrusion testing and cyber certification and validation. If you're a manufacturing process, you may have to generate data that would show I've got statistical process control, and I got quality assurance procedures, and I can know when my equipment starts to get out of spec, and on and on and on. So there are literally, it's like the IRS tax code. There's tens of thousands of pages printed devoted for testing and validation. And basically what this is all geared towards is making sure that when you put a product on a platform or in the hands of a warfighter, and it's used in combat, it's going to hold up, and it's not going to break in half when the guy needs it most. So that's what all this is for. It's very expensive and very rigorous for a reason. That's to prevent aircraft from failing in flight, and from weapons from jamming in the field, and from critical equipment from breaking when the warfighter needs it most.
Yeah, and so it really comes down to like standards and process, right? So the Air Force has devoted a lot of time and resources in developing standards that would satisfy their, to Brian's point, their requirement on putting something on a platform. So this goes back to, you need to have these conversations with your customer of, okay, we always call it planning for success. Plan that your demonstration is going to be phenomenal, right? And at the end of that demo, you're going to be then, you want to then ask your customer, okay, what type of validation efforts that we might need to go to meet, whether it be Mill Handbook 516 or some other certification criteria that the Air Force might have on your particular program. Again, have those conversations early on. And if your customer may not be spun up on what those criteria is, that doesn't mean, put it aside. You need to find somebody else. You need to go up to leadership and find those answers. So,
yeah. And one more point to sort of emphasize, Hank brought it up, but very often we'll hear from, I'll call it government customers or stakeholders, will say, well, let's wait until we see the demo to see if it works or not before we'll start, planning funding or invest more, I'll call it time and energy into thinking about, the validation or the scale-up piece. And that's a recipe for disaster. And so if a government customer tells you that and says, well, let's wait and see the demo first before we kind of do anything else, what he's really telling you is, I'm really busy and I don't want to invest that time right now until I know it's real or not. The problem is you need to push back really hard on that. And for the government people on this call, I would implore you to, like Hank said, you need to plan for success. Assume it's going to be wildly successful and give you phenomenal capability. If you're serious about implementing this thing, assuming it does work and it does provide a benefit, you've got to start this process almost in parallel. Because if you think about it from a time scale, the phase 2 is, let's say, 12 to 15 months. If that demo isn't done until maybe month 9 or 10 or 11, and then you start the actual process of identifying all the testing we might need to do, operational testing or certification testing, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, and you're going to have a huge gap in your program. Mm-hmm. So that's something we have to foot stomp is you've got to plan for success and assume it's going to be successful, and that we need to have things in place and lined up. Okay, business case. Business case can take many forms. It could be a financial business case, or it could be a qualitative, like mission impact, or filling a capability gap, things like that. So you don't need to put together a RAND or a Harvard Business School business case. Something that's quick and dirty, getting real inputs from the real operators. Sometimes it can be hard to track down the data. They may not know what the actual true costs are. We'll hear very often, it's like, well, I don't know what this costs, but we're just using it, but I know it breaks a lot. So you may have to go to a depot or to the Defense Logistics Agency or somebody else that has that information, but you need to track it down. And the reason for that is when you go to get funding and you go approach a commander or the MAGCOM, for example, and say, hey, we want $2 million to go and fund flight tests for my SBIR technology. One of the first questions they'll ask is, well, what's the benefit? Is there a quantified business case? Do we know the baseline? How much am I going to save, or how much capability is this going to add to me? So that's an important key. You got to have, that's probably one of your top 3 to do.
Yeah, I think Brian hit it on the head there that why you put the business case together is when you go to leadership and they're going to ask, well, what's the so what? So great, it gives me this mission impact, but if you're saving me $10 million a year, okay, then I might not mind as much to reprogram $2 to $3 million to fund that validation effort than what we're talking about is, maybe the most time consuming, expensive. and to be honest, not been programmed for your effort. And so now they got to take away from another program to fund your effort, and they need a damn good reason why. And that's where this business case comes in. If you don't understand quantitatively and qualitatively how your program is benefiting the Air Force, and you can't articulate that well, you're going to be in a tough spot.
Yeah, and just one practical example of that, working with a company that had an innovative battery for UAVs, their battery added 50% mission duration, which was phenomenal, but it quite literally was 10x the cost of the commercial off-the-shelf option. So the operator had to make a very tough decision, which is, well, these UAVs are somewhat expendable, and now instead of spending $500 on a battery, they want me to spend $4,000 or $5,000 on a battery. That's probably a no-go, right? So you've got to kind of work through some of those rough cut business cases up front to know if you even have a snowball's chance in hell of implementing something. Contracting. So this needs to be addressed, obviously, and when you get your MOU, one of the signatories on that, or at least one of the key stakeholders, is your contracting officer. But basically, a government organization needs to find a way to get you money, right? And so there's obviously the phase 2 contract you have, and there are certain types of monies that can be added to that. There's the phase 3. The key is identifying and engaging this stakeholder early, because they can actually be a source of help to put the right mechanisms in place so that when your government customer says, hey, we have follow-up money, I can get $400K to do flight tests, but I got to have it on contract in 30 days or it's going to go away. Having that contract in place, or having your contracting officer involved early, will be a huge source of help, because they can help you, be ready for those kind of things and navigate some of the challenges.
Yeah, and probably what I would add on to that is establishing which organization is going to lead that contracting effort, right? So if you're working with an end customer, you need to understand, do they have the contracting resources at their level to establish a phase 3, or is that something they're even comfortable with or even know how to do? A lot of SBIRs are new to, I would say, some of these end customers that we're now being asked to run these efforts. So, are they going to need to lean on the program office to execute a contract, or is it something that they need to kind of be spun up on? And there are resources out there to help folks through those contracting challenges. One thing that might want to add on here is, if you're doing a phase, when and if you are successful to get to a phase 3, it's great, sole source. You can write a very broad scope, accepts all different colors of money as long as it's non-SBIR. But identifying the type of contract is going to be, if it's firm fixed price, all right, that's a pretty simple contract. But if you're doing cost plus, that can be very complicated. And when you do a cost plus contract, typically you got to have a governor approved accounting system through DCAA and DCMA that's going to slow the process down. And so identifying that early on is necessary, right, to try and get over that hurdle. So.
Funding. Okay. Probably the number one reason SBIR companies fail. I would also say, though, that the reason that funding is not available is because of lack of planning early on in the program. But yeah, the discussion you need to have with your customer is, how does that customer intend to buy your capability or fund some integration activity or operational testing? Where's that money going to come from? Is it going to come from their unit funds, or do they have to go up to the wing commander and say, sir, we need $200,000 out of next year's, flying hour budget to go do this thing? Does the program office perhaps have funding, or maybe a depot or maintenance organization? But the key is figuring out who is going to fund that and what type of money they have, and what their constraints are. So it's not just as simple. The Air Force is not like a commercial corporation where they just have money that they can cut one budget and move it over to another simply. The Air Force has funding that's largely approved by Congress for specific purposes. And so even a 3-star general doesn't have as much latitude as you might think to just take $10 million and move it from one account to the other. So Congress keeps a very tight control on the DoD for funding, and very often you'll have to be careful but also creative on maybe using different types of funding for your purposes. So as an example, you might have a research effort that you need to do, that's $1 million to enhance the product and maybe to do lots of validation testing. Well, the law would say, well, you can't use sustainment funds for that. That's not research. However, Congress has allowed the Air Force to use sustainment funding for research and procurement purposes if they can show a demonstrated cost savings in the future. So there is latitude and there is gray area. The key would be have your customer engage their financial and their contracting folks, figure out where the flexibility is, and really think through this one carefully. And so the two key things on this would be for the Air Force to program funding, they have to have an estimate from you. So when you're engaging with them, you need to understand what your pricing or pricing range is going to be and what your likely scale-up costs are going to be. So it kind of does you no good to go into a customer and say, hey, we want to work on a phase 3 with you guys. We want you, to take our phase 2 SBIR and want you guys to buy it. And they go, well, okay, so how much is it going to cost per unit? And you go, well, we haven't quite worked our pricing model out yet. Okay, well, I can't help you budget then because I have no way. Is it $100 million or $100,000? I have no way of knowing that. And if you haven't thought through the engineering and manufacturing aspects of how much is going to take for me to scale up, or if they say, look, we need to do 6 months of operational testing evaluation, we want your engineers to be out there for 2 months of that to help train our guys and observe, situation in the field. I know, by the way, we're going to need to buy 20 systems, maybe have some spares on hand and all that stuff. You've got to budget that out. We have to think through that. So they say, well, okay, great. That's going to cost us probably $600,000 to support all that and work in the field. And where are they testing it? Are they going to be out at UMA Proving Grounds? Or are we testing it overseas in a foreign combat environment? That makes a big difference as well. So all those things need to be thought through very early in the program. And as best you can, just estimate and then do what the government does is add 20% for margin. So, give yourself some flexibility, but this is a key one. Okay, policy and training. So if you're giving the warfighter a new capability or a tool or changing the way they fundamentally do something, the Air Force and really most organizations, whether it's United Airlines, who does baggage handling and maintenance on their aircraft and engines, everybody uses technical orders, so they have a defined work practice, and those are very specific, and many times they're written by the original equipment manufacturer. So you need to basically understand and have a discussion with folks in, I'll call it the user, maybe the maintenance community, to understand, okay, what do we need to change about the procedure to make this work? And that has a lead time as well. TOs just don't get changed in 30 days. It can take 6 to 12 months, sometimes more. So again, these are just one of many things that you'll have to identify and just ask the question, will we need to change anything about your technical orders or your policy? Do you have to go to the headquarters and get a policy change or waiver? Changing technical orders also isn't free. There's an Air Force organization and budget that does that, but they have a stack and a queue of work that's already been in place for a couple of years. So now you're coming to the organization and, hey, we need to add 100K, of actual workload and requirement for you to change this technical order on my thing. And so they'll say, well, hey, get in line, man. We'll get to you next year. So these are, again, things that we have to just think through and think ahead a little bit.
Hey, real quick, sorry, I'm getting texts here from AFWERX. I apologize. I think we're on full screen mode, and so we're probably not seeing some of the questions that might be coming through. At the very end, we've only got a couple more charts here. At the very end, when we wrap up, we'll leave the last kind of 25 minutes or so to answering some of your questions. So apologize for that, but we'll hopefully get to them here shortly.
Okay. We're getting close to the end here. So infrastructure and organization. We talked about technical orders. There might be special tooling. There might be a facility upgrade that's needed. If you're in software, you might need to have, again, something that goes on the net. There's certain protocols and assurances that go through that. If you want to be, I'll call it off the net, you might have to put in a workstation that's disconnected from the Air Force network. So the idea is that there are often many hard and soft costs for implementation. And so one example that's been used quite a bit is Air Mobility Command bought a metal 3D printer for Travis Air Force Base. They sent it to them and said, okay, go have fun and play with it and do some great things. And they turned it on and couldn't even get it to work. Why? Well, because the electrical wasn't right. And then they needed to add plumbing and ventilation for the powder because the EPA and OSHA guys came in and said, well, if you have airborne powders, that's hazardous to workers. You need to ventilate that. And they had to put in a booth and run plumbing for inert gas for the cooling of the machine. and on and on and on. So there ended up being, on that $1 million additive manufacturing machine, an additional $2 million of cost to integrate that and upgrade the facility and train people to make that actually work. So, again, your capability is plugging into a system, a process, and a facility somewhere in the Air Force, and it's not just about your widget. It's about how it integrates, what else needs to be changed for that to happen. You may be hanging something on an aircraft integrating a new sensor, for example, and there might need to say, well, I've got unique power requirements. I need to actually upgrade or add a new data communications line, or upgrade the power to my sensor to make that work. That could literally be a $10 million change order that the OEM has to go do. So you need to think about all those things. Okay, getting close to the end here. So keys to success, you got to communicate early and often. Ask questions. So these charts are meant to arm you with questions to ask your government stakeholders, and ask them early. And if they can't give you a good answer, okay, that's fine. Then who could help me understand that answer, right? So if you're working with a flight line maintainer, I don't expect them to know who the airworthiness authority in the Air Force is. That's okay. Maybe the program officer of the depot would, or someone in his chain of command would. So ask the questions. If they can't answer them, identify the right people who can, and keep pushing. You have to keep pushing. So that's kind of the upshot of that. Do you have anything else on this one?
No, I would say that, that it's okay if you're your own, it's okay that you're providing some of the leadership. A lot of times in a small business, you kind of have to do that on your own. Again, as Brian said earlier, that these government customers, they want to see your capability demoed. They're excited about what it might bring, but they also have full-time jobs elsewhere, right? And so they're not there to lead your program and make sure it's successful. And sometimes you have to take that leadership upon yourself to identify those stakeholders and ask these challenging questions. And when you get a sense that maybe I got to go outside the box here to find someone that could answer my question, you're going to have to lead that. So it's difficult, right? Because if you got a phase 2, and technically you're just trying to make sure that your technology is working and going to be demonstrated in the environment that your customer wants to see. But now you have all these other challenges that you have to tackle. And what I would say is tackling them as early as possible is much more ideal than trying to tackle them at the end of the phase 2, where your program ends and you've got nothing on the horizon. And so, earlier the better here. So, okay. All right.
Okay, and that's it. So with that, we'll go out of full screen mode and pull up the chat. And
I think they're going to ask questions.
Okay. I'll just read them out to you.
Yeah, I think Brian's going to read them out to us. So
right.
I don't know if there's.
All right. So bear with us here. We're trying to figure out how to use WebEx. Here's the chat. Okay, cool. Okay. So one question was, how does Mill Handbook 516 relate to other life cycle documents like Mill Standard 810 and 461? I guess the question is, I guess I skipped one, sorry. So many of those are subsets. 516 tends to be the overarching one, and then there's a joint service, JSSG for propulsion. There are many other subset standards and ASTM tests and all those things that are kind of subordinate to that. So Mill Handbook 516 basically covers all hardware and software related certification for, really all Air Force weapons systems. So typically, other Mill handbooks and other standards will be subordinate to that. So again, that's where you have to sort of identify your engineering expert or point of contact as a stakeholder, and they'll be able to answer those questions. That's why they exist, essentially, is to cover that. Yeah,
the point of our kind of wasn't to say that 516 is the catch-all be-all. It's more that there are certification documents out there that will walk you through the validation and testing that you're going to have to do, and talk to your customer about what documents that you guys that you might need to reference for your particular program.
Yeah. Yeah. Question 1 is, does the Air Force buy on a subscription or software as a service basis? The answer is yes. The second part of that answer is that software as a service implies that you're going to host it remotely on a cloud or some other server. And so that creates challenges from a software assurance and cyber certification perspective. You know, depending on the nature of your software, it can be provided as a standalone software. I mean, I use the example of, you know, shipping your customer a DVD and having them hosted on a workstation that's disconnected from the net. That's often the easiest way, at least to get the customer to try something or trial it. You know, long term, if you want to have this capability available to multiple customers in the Air Force or DoD and want to use a SaaS business model, I mean, that's great, and that's the Air Force and DoD does that all the time. But there are second order effects like getting your software hosted on a government secure cloud. Are there any other questions people have out there?
Okay, well, I'd say that if not, then that kind of wraps up our talk today. Again, as we've kind of highlighted a number of times, what we would challenge you is to take this briefing and those transition planning areas that we kind of walk through and sit down with your customer and start having those conversations on how each one of these could be addressed. Again, earlier the better. You know, it's going to help you to get to a phase 3 seamlessly as is possible in the DoD.
Yep. One final question is, can we get a copy of these slides? Yeah, the answer is yes. So we'll put them in PDF and make them available. And what we'll do is we'll add our contact information as well at the back end of that. So that's the. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks,
right.
Matt.
Well, thanks everyone. Appreciate your time. Again, charts will be available. Please reach out. Yep. All right.
Thank you.
We're taking in matching funding for their phase 2.
All right, we're going to switch over to the virtual spark ladder and pitch bowl.
All right. Thanks a lot. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Be interesting to know how many people dialed in.
Yeah, there's 61.
Yeah.